I think now it would be very nice if we can preview your newest chair. Why don't we just go up here and have a little preview of this? Well, that is quite a departure, Charles, and it looks wonderfully comfortable. Tell us something about it.
Hey folks, hope you're well. Zito here. This week I finished this, which is basically my little Eames Lounge chair rendition made with Recycled Skateboards, of course. Friggin' pretty pumped. This project's been like a year or two in the making. I originally bought this faux Eames chair a couple years back, thinking that I'd actually put like an inlay of skateboards in it and things like that. The main issue actually, unfortunately, was that the surface was curved. So to carve out a proper triangle to put like a chevron into the inlay and stuff like that ended up being pretty difficult. And not to mention the veneer that's on top of all the plywood is about 1/32 of an inch. So to shape the skateboards, then to also have it be flush with the inlay became pretty difficult and stuff. So pretty much just put it on the back burner until I decided to just friggin' remake all the panels out of skateboards or whatever altogether. So yeah, pretty stoked, and it's not perfect, but that's any project I do, but pretty pumped on how it turned out. So yeah, figured I'd go over that with y'all. So yeah, here's the kind of steps that I took with it anyhow. So we started off with a bunch of skateboards, as per usual. This time around, I don't actually go through the process of how I prep the boards. I just had glued them right into panels and things like that, that were effectively 1.25 inches thick. Knowing that I wanted to go for a pattern with a chevron in the middle, I actually had a chevron glued up and everything like that. And knew that I basically had to cut it out and basically stick it into the vertical strips of skateboards that went across. But with that, you also notice in the panel itself that there's quite the curvature, and then also on the edges, it curves right up to fit the contour of the cushion itself. So to match those particular angles, I kind of actually did a test fit with a piece of oak that I found laying around or something like that. Really what I ended up doing was, yeah, just making a couple angles and just testing those angles out until it seemed like it fit the approximate curve. And I found that to be approximately 73 degrees, 73 degrees, 73 degrees, followed by a 65-degree cut that basically fit roughly the shape of the curvature in the panel and stuff like that. So yeah, basically mimic that, put splines in it, and with the test done, I figured, you know, the next part was effectively to transfer that over into the big blob of skateboards and stuff. So having marked out my rough approximate edges and things like that, I actually cut out at 90 degrees first, those particular sections that would become the curvature and stuff. And then once I had those particular sections cut out at 90 degrees, I would actually give the table saw an angle, and then I'd cut those particular angles out in the wood itself. And then came the bit of a moment of truth where you threw it all together, all the curved pieces up against the panel. And unfortunately what I found was that I was shy several skateboards, about 4 strips or so. Prior to cutting out the chevron and stuff like that, I had to add approximately four particular rows of skateboards and things like that in there. Once that was done, I actually had to retrace out the chevron. And the issue with that was that now one side would actually, the center of the chevron would actually be offset, whereas before it would have been nice clean cuts down the edges and stuff like that. So what I actually ended up having to do was cut one side with the bandsaw, the side that had a bit of the additional 4 pieces on it. And that proved to be not as clean of a cut as it would have been with the table saw. The other side's really quite clean. But you know, as with all of my jobs and stuff like that, there are minor imperfections and things. So, you know, no sweat and stuff like that, and it's all a bit of a learning process, right? Hopefully better for the next time around there. So following that, of course, came the glue up of the chevron into the boards itself. And once that was glued together, we take all the panels together, cut out our sections for splines, and then we fit them all together and glue them all together with some West System epoxy. West System's the glue I use for most of my projects. I've built canoes out of it. I put paddles together with it, and yeah, it's just a product that I know will work well and provide a really solid bond and stuff. So yeah, slam those things together, and come the next day, we basically had our rough blank to work from. So from there, I ended up using a cut-saw grinder blade. And I ended up using this mostly because I couldn't find my Arbor Techie blade, which was $200. This thing was about $80, so about half the price of this thing, and I figured I'd give this thing a test. So, you know, after having set it up in the shop, decided to give it a go, and boom. What I found, unfortunately, was that it was a damn dust storm in there.
A major dust storm swept over Mildura in northwestern Victoria late yesterday with a huge red cloud descending on the town. It was fueled by strong winds in a weather phenomenon normally seen in summer.
Camera was dusty, everything was dusty, and it's not safe for any of our lungs and stuff like that. So it makes pretty fine dust, and it's pretty tricky to actually use in an indoor environment and stuff like that. So I decided to essentially move it outdoors. But before I did that, what I ended up doing was using a reciprocating saw, and just because the edges were the straight edge sort of thing that I needed to then create curvatures so that it curved to the cushions and things like that, I ended up using a reciprocating saw with the piece clamped down and just, you know, cut out those edges, which worked well. And then once the rough curvatures were in there, we relocated to the outside and grinded that thing down, and yeah, it worked beauty. I can't complain about this particular tool. So once we had it all grounded down, then came, of course, some sanding and stuff. And I decided to use some 60 grit at first just to get those teeth marks out. So sometimes this happens with skateboards. You know, you put a little too much pressure on things, you're talking about multiple glue joints over the length of your entire material. But what I usually do for these types of issues is I'll use some 5-minute epoxy, and I was able to basically slam all the pieces back together. So once that thing was back together, we continued to sand down further until we were happy with basically what we had. And from that point, I basically had my back panel, which I'm super pumped about. Then taking apart the hardware from the original panel, and also taking apart the cushion, I noticed the cushion kind of actually had the tracers for where the hardware would go. So I ended up using that, putting the hardware into those particular areas, and basically had all the hardware on there. Last part was, of course, transferring the holes for the hardware for the actual chair itself. And then from there, basically did a test fit, and yeah, boom, we got a bit of a panel that works and that looks great on this damn chair. So I'm pumped. That's basically part one of this particular project. I think the panel looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to, of course, reinforcing it with some fiberglass. And then from there, I'm going to slam it back on there. And of course, I want to finish the next section down and kind of have the chevron become sort of like a diamond shape so that, you know, it's pretty beautiful to look at and stuff. And that's to hopefully come, we'll see, the next month or two when I'm kind of feeling up for the task and stuff like that. But yeah, this one was kind of a year or two in the making, and happy we slammed this thing together. And yeah, got a bit of love on IG, so I'm pretty pumped. And yeah, just, I don't know, it's just hopefully a piece that's gonna last for generations and just something that's gonna be really fun in my home instead of looking at a faux Eames chair and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks so much for following along, and really appreciate it. Anyhow, all the best. Take it easy.